Chapter 12. Juliana. The Dinner. By the time I got home, I knew it would be selfish of me to boycott the Losky's dinner party. My mother had already spent a lot of time humming over pie recipes and going through her closet for something suitable to wear. She'd even bought a new shirt for Dad and had scrutinized what the boys intended to wear. Obviously, she was looking forward to the dinner. Not that I really understood that, but I didn't want to ruin everything by telling her about my newfound hatred of Bryce. And Dad felt bad enough about David already. The last thing he needed was to hear about crackpot comments made by immature 8th graders. So that night I went through the motions of baking pies with my mother and convinced myself that I was doing the right thing. One dinner couldn't change anyone's life. I just had to get through it. Friday at school, I avoided the blue-eyed brat the best I could. But that night, as I got dressed, I found myself staring at the painting my father had given me and became furious all over again. Bryce had never been a friend to me, ever. He hadn't made a stand for a tree. He'd thrown away my axe. And he'd made fun of me at my uncle's expense. Why was I playing along like we were jolly friends and neighbors? When my mother called that it was time to go, I went out in the hall with every intention of telling her that I could not go to the Loskis for dinner. But she looked so lovely and happy that I couldn't. I just couldn't. I took a deep breath, wrap up pie, and shuffled across the street behind my brothers and parents. Chet answered the door. Maybe I should have been mad at him too, for telling the Loskis about my uncle. But I wasn't. I hadn't asked him not to tell, and he certainly wasn't the one making fun of David. Mrs. Losky came up behind Chet, whisked us in, and fluttered about. And even though she had quite a bit of makeup on, I was surprised to see the blueness of bags beneath her eyes. Then Mrs. Losky and my mother went off with the pies. My brothers vanished down the hall with Netta. And my father followed Chet into the living room. And wasn't that just dandy? That left me alone in the foyer with Bryce. He said hi to me and I lost it. I spun on him, snapping. Don't you speak to me. I overheard you and Garrett in the library, and I don't want to talk to you now or ever. I started to walk into the living room, but he stopped me. Julie, wait, he whispered. I'm not the bad guy here. That was Garrett. That was all Garrett. I glared at him. I know what I heard. No, you don't. I was feeling bad about the eggs and what I said about your yard. I didn't know anything about your uncle or what kind of situation your family was in, okay? I just wanted to talk to someone about it. Our eyes locked for a minute, and for the first time the blueness of his didn't freeze on my brain. I heard you laugh. He made a joke about me being a retard. And you left. Julie, you don't understand. I wanted to punch him. Really, I did. But we were in the library. So instead you left. He shrugged and looked miserable and sheepish. Yeah, I left him. Just walked into the living room and left him. If he was making it up, he was quite an actor. If he was telling the truth, then Chet was right. He was a coward. Either way, I didn't want to be anywhere near him. I stood beside my father and tried to follow his discussion with Chet about something they both read in the paper. My father was saying, well, what he's proposing would require a perpetual motion machine, so it's not possible. Chet replied, maybe in the context of what scientists know now. But do you rule it out completely? At that moment, I was feeling absolutely no scientific curiosity. But in a desperate attempt to block Bryce Losky from my mind, I asked, what's a perpetual motion machine? My mother and Chet glanced at each other, chuckled, then shrugged, giving me the sense that they'd just agreed to let me into the secret club. My father explained, It's a machine that, that runs without any external power source. No electricity, no fuel, no water propulsion, nothing. Chad glanced over my shoulder and asked rather absently, "You think that's a doable thing?" What had distracted him? Was Bryce still in the foyer? Why didn't he just go away? I forced myself to focus on the conversation. Do I think that's a doable thing? Well, I don't really know. All machines use energy, right? Even real efficient ones. And that energy has to come from somewhere. What if the machine generated itself? Chet asked, but one eye was still on the foyer. How could it do that? Neither of them answered me. Instead, my father stuck out his hand and said, "Good evening, Rick. Nice of you to have us over." Mr. Losky pumped my dad's hands and joined our group, making little comments about the weather. When that topic was all dried up, he said, and wow, that yard of yours has really come along. I told Chet here that we ought to hire him out. He really knows his pickets, doesn't he?" He was joking, I think, but my father didn't take it that way, and neither did Chet. I was afraid of what might happen next, but then Mrs. Lusky tinkled the little dinner bell and called, "Horse Diobores, everybody." The horse Diobores were delicious, but when my father whispered that the teeny tiny blackberries on the top of the crackers weren't berries at all, but caviar, I stopped mid-bite. Fish eggs? Repulsive. Then my father pointed out that I ate chicken eggs all the time, so why get squeamish over fish eggs? He had a point. I hesitantly finished the cracker, and before long I was having another.